Welcome, everybody, from around the US and across the world, and anybody who might be watching into the future. My name's Bill Brown, and I am the Director of Programming, Publishing, and Advocacy for Prison Yoga Project. And I have the pleasure this morning of having a conversation with my colleague and friend, Jackie Crockford. Do you prefer Jackie or Jacqueline? I know it's Jacqueline in your bio, but
Jackie is fine. Yeah.
it's fine. Okay. And I've known Jackie now since 2017, and we've been facilitating programs together. We facilitate together at Richard J. Donovan in San Diego County, which is unceded territory of the Kumeyaay people. And Jackie is a facilitator who's also working in several of the jails around San Diego. I'm going to go ahead and I'll read her bio out. And then we'll do a short centering. We'll get into our conversation and then have some time for Q&A. So yeah, from your bio. I always feel a little weird when I'm just reading these things out, but this way we get everything. So Jackie Crockford, DHSC, which stands for Doctorate of Health Sciences, Doctor of Health Sciences, is an ACE certified personal trainer and health coach. She has been a personal trainer and performance coach for 20 years. Jackie grew up in the fitness industry, participating in YMCA sports and teaching gymnastics and swimming from a young age. She was on Kansas City University's women's rowing team and is a three-time Ironman triathlon finisher. Jackie's professional trajectory has evolved to include content production, product management with a specialty in adults online education. She has been featured in several publications as a fitness and wellness expert, including the LA Times, New York Post, Health, USA, Triathlon, Shape, and Women's Health. My phone is ringing. Her journey to yoga began with a desire to improve mobility and reduce stress for athletic performance, and has evolved to understanding the broader benefits as it relates to trauma. And she began facilitating yoga inside correctional facilities in 2017 with Prison Yoga Project. So welcome, Jackie. I'm going to grab my phone so that it doesn't keep ringing.
Yeah.
Here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's interesting when you hear your own bio read back to you, and I kind of been thinking like, oh yeah, that did happen. I did do those things. So it's nice to be here. And like Bill said, I've been facilitating with PYP since 2017. And, we'll talk about it today, but it's just been a wonderful experience. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we like to start with a centering practice just so that we can all drop into our bodies and feel a little more grounded as we get started. So I would love for you to lead us through a centering, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Again, thanks for joining us today. I am seated here at my home in San Diego, and I know Bill is seated as well. If you find yourself wherever you are in the world, you can find a seat, or you could be standing or maybe lying down, whatever feels most comfortable to you here today for your body. And you're welcome to keep your eyes open for just a moment. We'll do a little bit of orientating and recognizing where we are in our life today. So feel free to look around the space that you're in. Notice maybe 3 colors that you can see in the space where you are. Just taking in some information with our sense of sight. Noticing a few colors. And then you're welcome to settle in. If you'd like to close your eyes, you can do that. If you'd like to keep them open, that's always an option. And I'll invite you to transfer your awareness to your sense of hearing. And just notice what might be coming in through your ears. For me, I hear a few sounds in my space. I have a small four-legged animal next to me who's shuffling around a little bit. Some noise outside my window. Just notice what you hear. And then let's shift our awareness to our sense of taste, which maybe we don't often think of unless we are actually eating something. So if you're eating something right now, feel free to notice what that tastes like, how it feels in your mouth, maybe the temperature of what you might be eating or drinking. And if you're not eating something, maybe see what it feels like to move your mouth around a little bit, perhaps graze your teeth with your tongue, or maybe just notice how the inside of your mouth feels. Maybe you notice that you need to take a sip of water. And then we'll shift our awareness to our sense of touch. Just bringing some curiosity to where you are in touch with the surfaces around you. If you're seated in a chair, where your hips or your back or your legs are in contact with your chair. If you're standing or walking somewhere, maybe noticing your feet as they move on the ground and feeling the ground supporting you. Just noticing what we feel. And then lastly, we'll bring our awareness to our sense of smell, which will take us into our breath a little bit here. So maybe taking an inhale through your nose. And if you'd like, an open mouth exhale. Just noticing the breath coming in and out. Maybe sensing where in your body you feel your breath the most today. Today, I feel mine, I think, a little bit higher inside my nose and feel the air coming in. It feels a little bit cool, but maybe you notice the temperature of the air, how it feels as it comes down through your nose, your throat, into your chest and your lungs. We'll continue to take just a few more rounds of breath here. Allowing the air just to flow in and out naturally. And again, if an open mouth exhale feels like it would feel nice today, just letting the air drop out. Wonderful. If your eyes are closed and you'd like to blink them open, maybe again, looking around your room, looking around the space that you're in, coming back to us here for our conversation today. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much for that. How does it feel? How does it feel to lead that?
I love it. I physically, that's an orientating practice and a way to orientate ourselves to the space that we're in when we begin practicing yoga or just kind of need to be where we are. And so sometimes I actually find myself doing that when I'm not doing anything related to yoga, so to speak, air quotes there, but just in a way to make sure I am where I'm supposed to be at that time. So I really like that practice because it gets me, makes me feel like I'm in my body. I can sense some things around me, but I'm also not so concerned, and it helps me to focus on me and myself and kind of how I'm feeling in the moment. So it's a nice way to arrive into a practice or into a space. And so it feels, for me, it feels really grounding and sort of balancing to do that, at the beginning of yoga, but also sort of anytime during the day.
Yeah, it's interesting because you put yoga in words, and there's this practice of like pure presence, and can you say a little bit more about that? And that might be a really good way. Normally we ask about like, what was your entrance into yoga and your experience with yoga? So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I think most of us know who are here right now that yoga is far more than, doing a warrior pose, far more than the angles of the asanas and the position of your body in space. But that is what brought me to it, because of my background in exercise and fitness and athletics. That was something that interested me. I really enjoyed the sensation of stretching and, elongating my body and making it feel kind of, in my mind, better for all of the other things that I wanted to do with it. And, activities that I was interested in and, sports that I was doing. But as I said, we all know here that it's far more than just the physicality of it. And when I talk about yoga now, again, air quotes, and when I'm talking about what I do with PYP, I always talk about how almost always say something about how it really doesn't have anything to do with the pose itself and more to do about what's going on inside the body when we are in any position or, state. And just being mindful and aware of what that is. That's the idea of the type of practice that I like to offer. So it goes much deeper than just the angles and the anatomy of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It really strikes me because there right now that I feel like you offer a real, maybe there's an opportunity that you bring because of your background with fitness, because so many of the guys that I know when we go into Donovan together, like there's a lot of them want to know about something physical and anatomical, and that's a lot of the conversation, the way it starts. But I know, and I've observed in the 7 years that we've known each other, just this real growing mindfulness aspect of what you do. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about how that evolution has happened, and then I think maybe like how that might create a bridge for a lot of the people that come into our program into that.
Yeah, I think when people think of yoga, like I said, they think of the angles and the poses and the positions, and that it's stretching, right? And I hear so often that oh yeah, I should do more yoga because I'm so tight. Those are the two things that people put together. I'm tight, and therefore I should do yoga, but I don't. Is kind of also part of that conversation. I also like to say that, for me, doing yoga and fitness and kind of movement in general, and when people talk about, oh, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga, or I'm not fit enough to go into the gym, or things like that, I use the analogy of taking a shower. And, if you need to clean your body, if you'd like to become clean, you take a bath or you take a shower, right? You don't say I'm too dirty to take a shower. So I like to use that analogy, and people go, "Oh, I guess that's true." Like that is what
it's a perfect analogy.
Right? So I like to use that analogy for folks, and I think as far as the evolution of understanding that yoga is so much more than just becoming flexible. I started in health and fitness, and athletics is my background. And I came to it because I felt like that's what was going to help me be a better athlete, or, feel better in my body or reduce injury. And that is true. There is so much research out there about the benefits of yoga for athletic performance and mobility and strength and flexibility and all the things that we do with our bodies as athletes, or, as anybody that's interested in health and fitness. And in that process, I was, I don't know, blissfully unaware, I guess, of all of the other benefits. And they slowly started to make themselves clear to me. So over time, I realized like, oh yeah, I feel better. Like I feel a little bit less stressed, or I feel a little bit more calm. Or I'm not as reactive to things, and I can take a moment and go, okay, and kind of then move forward, I think. But there was an instance for me, and Bill, I don't even actually know if you know this story, but many years ago, I went through a divorce, and that's a hard time for folks, just no matter the situation. And in a yoga class that I had taken many times, it wasn't the first type of this yoga class that I went to. It wasn't the first time I had experienced this class with this teacher. As we know, yoga teachers and fitness teachers can kind of make or break the experience for people sometimes. So this wasn't a new experience for me, but something on that day sort of broke open. And I could feel a very real sense of like weightlessness and lightness, and something being lifted and like pulled out of me. And I remember very, very distinctly being in Shavasana at the end of the class, and almost feeling like, it sounds hippie woo woo when you say it out loud, but it almost felt like I was above the floor. Like my body felt so light and lifted, and like something was being removed and, kind of washed away. And I can only describe it as kind of like a whooshing is how it felt. If water moves through a space quickly, and the space is left open and clean and cleansed, that's how it felt. And I have a very distinct memory of where I was, who was around me, what the room looked like, and when I opened my eyes, what I felt like. And so that was it was one of those things that was very acute.
Yeah.
In the moment, but I realized this is far more than any of the athletic performance or, flexibility. This has nothing to do with any of that. And so, and I liked it, I got, enjoyed that feeling and wanted to understand it a little bit more. So, I decided to do a yoga teacher training program, and that's where I met Bill. And, the rest is history. I think we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that was sort of the transition, I think, for me in understanding that it's just so much more than the poses.
Wow. And it sounds like it came at a point where, um, outside of your practice, there was also this major transition happening for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And, it took me a long time to understand, we'll talk about trauma a little bit. It took me a long time to understand that process that I was going through was a traumatic process. I didn't think of it as that for a long time. And so a lot of things sort of started to fall in place in my mind and understanding of what was going on for me personally. And that really helped me to understand other people as well, because that's kind of the one of the aspects that I love about this practice is that I always felt like and if you talk to my sister, she'll say this to you, that I see the best in people.
Yeah.
And I think seeing the best in people is also seeing things that they, maybe don't want you to see or feel like they need to hide, but that are real aspects of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And yoga and teaching yoga in these facilities and in these spaces is a way for me that I feel like I'm seeing the best of people.
And I know that I always say that we show up in a way that, even though we're not all always at our best, like we want to create an opportunity for that best self to arrive and to be there in the room, and for us to be able to be together in that way, and get to practice being our best selves.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah, I'm really, thank you for sharing that story with me. I didn't know that. And I'm always sort of, and I think that this will probably come out a little bit more in terms of like, okay, so this whoosh comes through and it feels like you're swept clean, and there's a connection in with the yoga, and
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, when people have experienced certain things, and I still feel this from time to time myself, where the trauma that I felt as a child, sometimes I will find myself um, uh, tensing in a
Yeah.
particular way, and I'll feel the memory of what it was that had happened, and the grimace that I might have been holding. And I think there is a holding that happens in the body. And sometimes that's built up around protecting ourselves from whatever traumatic event was,
Mm-hmm.
or it might be holding on to an identity or a posture that we felt like we had to show up in the world in a particular way. And it's an embodied thing. Our body is holding on to that and physical things are tangible, they're real and they're fixed, and so when we do that and we work with the body and we start to free those things from the body, and that releases, and then something new gets to emerge.
Yeah.
So you decided to do a yoga teacher training. This was an experience that led you into a yoga teacher training. Did I come and speak at the teacher training that you were doing? Was
Yes.
that
Yeah.
you?
Yes. Here in San Diego, I decided to do my yoga teacher training, and it was really more. At the time, my intention was I didn't want to be a yoga teacher. Like that wasn't my intention of going to the yoga teacher training.
Yeah.
I was into health and fitness, and that is my career. And so I knew that from a career standpoint, it was important for me to learn about this aspect of fitness and wellness. And so I was coming at it from that angle, but also knew there was something else there that I didn't quite understand and wanted to learn more about. And the yoga teacher training at Happy You, which is a different studio name now here in San Diego.
Yeah, that's right.
Was amazing. And it was all around, the reason I picked that one is because there were modules around positive psychology, which is very interesting to me. And one of the modules was trauma-informed yoga with Mr. Bill Brown. And so that during that time as well, I was, I have a friend who we grew up together, and during the time of physically, actually during the time that I was going through my teacher training program, he was incarcerated and is now, after many, many years of a long story, is now serving a life sentence for what happened while I was going through that teacher training. And we've remained in contact ever since. And like I said, we grew up together. And so we've known each other over 30 years, and he's a very close friend of mine. And so that experience and, being close to someone who was going through that, and learning more about the criminal justice system, understanding the inequities that are happening to people who do not look like Bill and I. And that, that was a really powerful time and experience. And so when Bill came to that yoga teacher training and said, I teach yoga in prison, immediately I said, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I have to do that. Because it felt like the right thing to do for many reasons. And I don't know if I have to explain that to everyone here, listening today, because I think we're all here because we get it. But it was a way for me personally to support my friend and support people like my friend in a way that I could, and in a way that I felt like was going to be helpful, really helpful in the long term. Because as I learned in the original teacher training, and then throughout this time as a facilitator and other trainings and reading the books and, just kind of diving into it, this is not a process that happens in a class. This is a process that happens over many, 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 many classes, many, many weeks, many years even. And that was something I wanted to be a part of, if not for anyone else, for the sake of my dear friend who was in the process of going through it literally at that time.
It's interesting. I mean, it's bizarre that we've known each other as long as I have. I feel like there's these things that I'm just learning. I didn't realize the confluence of those things. I mean, it's like I knew all of those pieces, but I didn't realize how coincidental everything was, in the fact that your friend was going through this at the time that you were taking this teacher training, at the time, inspired by this transitional moment and experience that you had connected to yoga, and how all of those things really came together. Amazing.
Life happens for a reason, I think. And I'm glad to be, sitting here right now having this conversation, because I think, 7 years ago was a different time and a different story. And it's just been just such a wonderful experience to get to see and, be inside with people that deserve to have this kind of support.
So I'm curious about that. And I think that's, again, it's like, I love to follow these threads that come up. So then you made the choice to get involved with PYP. There was a moment where it's like, oh, it just totally made sense. Yoga in prisons, this is what I want to do. And then you go in, and there must have been some, and I'm imagining that there are not just preconceptions, but then there's a whole set of emotions surrounding knowing that what your friend was facing as you get started going in. And do you remember what it was like in the beginning and some of your first times going in? What was the first time you went in?
Yeah. The first time I went in was to Donovan State Prison. And I remember the doors. I remember the walking through and having to wait for the doors to open and then close, for another door to open and then close, for another door to open and then close. And I remember the space, which we're now back in. We originally were facilitating classes inside of the large gym space in one of the yards, and it looks really different to me now, Bill, to be honest with you. I thought about this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that I went in and I felt like, I'm inside a prison. This is a prison gym. It felt dingy and dark and dirty, and just those were all the things that I was taking in at the time.
Yeah.
And now going in, I feel a sense of lightness there. There's more color on the walls. First of all, it's kind of transitioned physically. They use that space during the pandemic as quarantine area, and so the space itself has gone through a little bit of transition as well. But now when I go in, I sense the energy that's in there when we are facilitating and when the guys come in for the class, and there is a sense of lightness. And so that for me is a very important transition of just over 7 years of this is dingy and dark and dirty and kind of like, how do I feel about being here, to I really, really like being here and I feel very comfortable here, to the point where I fall asleep sometimes in the classes if somebody else is facilitating, because it feels so comforting to me. So can take that with however that looks, but I think that's a really interesting transition. And one of the things I remember also about going in the very first time was being able to leave. That day was very emotional. I'm going to get emotional about it now, but because of what was happening with my friend at the time, I could come in and I could go through all the doors that open and close and open and close and open and close. And then I could leave, through those same doors. And I remember getting in my car and eating a bar. So I was hungry and I had a protein bar or something. And I remember that I hated eating these bars. I thought they were gross, but it was like a snack that I had. And I remembered feeling so grateful for that bar that day, because I could do that. I could go and I could leave and I could eat this disgusting protein bar in my car that I was going to then drive home. And so I did feel an immense sense of gratitude and a bit of guilt, to be honest. And I felt a lot of things that day, but it was something that I wanted to, like I said, learn more about and understand, and knew that it was such a powerful feeling that I had to keep coming back, and I had to keep doing this thing that I knew meant a lot for my friend and for the other people in the classes, if that's how powerful it was for me.
Yeah. And you have been, like, over the years, one of the most, I think the proper term is stalwart facilitators. Like, you've been there consistently facilitating with us since the moment you started. Mm-hmm. And I know that prior to the pandemic, it really, at RJD, we had people who had been cleared and they fell away, and then it got down towards the time that we were heading into the pandemic, and we were basically alternating weeks and then occasionally overlapping. And I really appreciate how consistent and dedicated you've been throughout all of the time
Yeah.
in doing this, and I think that it really is. I mean, I imagine that you feel similar to I do in this, that I don't see myself ever not going in as long as I'm physically capable
Right.
of going in and doing something to maintain those connections and the relationships that you develop with people inside. Because and maybe this, and I, uh, I imagine that having a friend who is experiencing this, you recognize like the toll that it takes
Right.
on people, and then also the folks on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah. I think over the years, it's been interesting to talk to people. And when they find out that I teach yoga in prisons, they have so many questions and have so many, misconceptions about what that is like. Um, it's a unique, very interesting experience every single time. That's for sure. No other class that I've ever been to, because I've been to a lot of fitness classes. Again, this is also what I do for a living
Yeah.
outside. Um, and I've been to a lot of gyms and facilities and fitness classes, and no other time has anyone ever brought their pet lizard inside their front pocket, into a class, because that has happened inside Donovan.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting, but it also shows such a wonderful side of humanity. I think that people, I believe, it is my belief that people understand that it's there, but maybe want to not acknowledge it or forget about it, because of how our prison system
Mm.
works. And because of my connection with my friend that I grew up with, and still am in contact. We exchanged messages this morning from the facility that he's in, back in my home state. I refuse to forget about it. And so yeah, I'm gonna keep going back in, like you said, until I probably am physically unable, because I believe that it matters to the people who are there. And I believe in the work that is happening, because I've seen it, change people. I've seen it change people's lives and their attitude and their outlook and how they feel physically. And it is just amazing, amazing work.
Yeah. It feels like there was no hesitation for you about getting involved. Are there things that in that journey of going in that you wish you had known going into it, or like if you could go back and advise yourself from
Yeah.
7 years ago, what advice would you give?
I think the advice would be to do it sooner. to go in sooner, and and go for it again. I think if there's anyone that has just an inkling of an interest and a curiosity about what it would be like to support people who are incarcerated through a practice that is scientifically proven to support them in healing from trauma, do it. It will be I think one of the most impactful things that you can do, with that interest and with, those skills. Yeah, do it sooner, get involved faster. And, be open to, I would tell myself to be open to the experience, and that there isn't anything to be afraid of. I think a lot of times, like I said, when I talk to people who are in the general population, one of their many questions is, aren't you scared? Or don't you feel nervous or, is it safe kind of thing? And my response is always, I feel safer inside of those facilities than I do walking down the street.
Yeah.
And I live in a safe neighborhood, in the middle of San Diego, California. Nothing is harm is not going to come to me in there. And if it does, all of the people in those classes I know will have my back because we're there offering a service to them that they value so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned trauma, and let's come back to that. What is it? I mean, what from your perspective, what do you think is happening with yoga? And yeah, I'll leave it at that. What do you think is happening that makes it so effective and so transformational?
Yeah, I think, again, we think of yoga. Many times people think of yoga as the pose and the asana and the physical shape of it. And we know also that yoga means union of the body and union of the mind. And this practice that we offer inside these facilities is a, mindfulness-based, trauma-informed approach, meaning we offer things through a yogic lens and try yogic familiar poses, but the emphasis is not on what that pose looks like. The emphasis is on how someone in their body can feel and notice. And we're just giving them kind of an opportunity or a way to sort of feel that out. So I feel like, if we're doing a chair pose, for example, and I've been in athletics and sports, and I've done a lot of squats in my day. So I understand and, can feel what it feels like to do hard work with my lower body, for example. And so if someone can be in a space and have an opportunity to just simply become aware that their body is efforting in a chair pose, for example, that is a step in the direction of bringing that union to the mind and to the body, because it's very, when we go through a traumatic experience, many times it's likely that we disassociate from the sensations in our body that are going to tell us if we are safe or not, or if we're in danger, or if we are okay. And so giving our bodies an opportunity to safely navigate to where we have some sensation, and then can first become aware of the sensation and go, oh, that's there. I feel heat in my legs, for example. My legs feel warm. And then go, well, do I like that? Is that okay with me that I feel this? Yeah, I think that's okay. I feel good about this. I feel strong. So I'd like to stay here a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
And now the heat is building more, right? The effort is building more. We're still holding this chair pose, giving someone the opportunity then in that space to go, actually, I don't want to be here anymore. Having them feel the autonomy of, I can make a decision for myself. I have ownership over how my body is going to react right now. Allows us to, we practice it in the space of yoga and in the context of yoga, but it allows us to start to make those same healthier decisions and autonomous decisions for our bodies outside of that space. And that is something that in the time, back before I did my yoga teacher training and when I was doing yoga, just for the flexibility aspect of it, that is something I would have never thought would be the most important thing for me. And as it turns out for, I think, people, because, when we're working with people, we are working with trauma, as we say. I believe that is the most important thing that we can offer somebody in these classes, is an opportunity to safely navigate an experience so that they can learn how to be autonomous in making decisions for their body that are safe and healthy.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, absolutely perfect. And I think this is the art in becoming an effective trauma-informed facilitator is how do you create a space for that process to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and allow for that process to happen for all of the people who are in that circle, for them to have that autonomy to navigate that experience, and that yet how does that translate out into their day-to-day daily experience. Yeah, beautiful. um I feel like we should be moving towards some Q&A, but I just want to ask you, I made a list of questions. I don't think I've looked at them. I mean, I keep glancing at it, but my eyes are bad enough that I can't actually read any of the questions. So I hope we covered everything, because I felt like they were a really good set of questions. But are there things, are there things that you, like, as we transition over to doing some Q&A, like, is there something that you want to talk about that we haven't touched on, or just something?
You sent me a couple of things that we might talk about, and I had this this story and this experience come up and remind myself that I reminded myself of. I mentioned that inside of prison is a look at humanity that most people don't get to see if they're not incarcerated, if they do not work inside of a prison system, they don't see it, or if they do, maybe they don't take the time to notice it. But I think because we're going in for this type of service, for me, it feels, I feel like I notice a lot of what's going on that we just don't get to see or notice in other spaces. So I do remember one of the first times that I went in early with you, Bill, and I don't know if you were actually there for this class. I might have been there by myself, but it was during a time in our country where a lot of things were happening with racial injustice, and it happens all the time. But there were a lot of things in the news about racial injustice, I will say, and so that was a really heightened time.
Yeah,
and of course, as we know, there's a disparity of racial groups who are incarcerated, and during this one yoga class, I remember it included a lot of folks who had some mobility challenges, and some folks come in who, can move and walk around just fine, or have walkers, or, are kind of shuffling along and, making their way. So everybody kind of was at a different level. But I remember there was a man, a Black gentleman who, was maybe in his late 60s, who was having trouble getting up and down from the mat. And sometimes we have chairs available, sometimes we don't. This is in the middle of a class. And so I'm also learning at that time how to facilitate with different folks with different mobility needs. But he was on his way to sit down on the floor onto the mat. And, he made his way there, and we asked if he needed anything. We have blocks, etc. So he's sitting on his mat. He seems fine. And during the middle of the class, he kind of was moving and shifting around and kind of acting as if he wanted to get back up and was maybe having trouble. There was a gentleman next to him who was white and about the same age, with also some mobility challenges, who at the beginning of class I had noticed had these really big boots on, and had trouble getting them on and off, but took his boots off to do the class and kind of set them next to the mat. And in the middle of the class, saw his neighbor having trouble struggling to stand back up, he himself struggled to then put back on his heavy boots, shuffle himself over to where the chairs were, and came back and brought his neighbor this chair.
Yeah.
And, at the time, like I said, it was a lot of racial discourse happening. And I just watched these two men inside of prison take care of each other.
Yeah.
And it was, beautiful. And so those are the things that people don't assume are happening. They assume actually the opposite is happening. And I just like to find those stories because they are happening. And I think it's important that we see them.
It's interesting to hear you say that and to feel how moved you are by witnessing that, and to know that, like, if I say, if there anything that we didn't touch on, that's the story that comes up. And I think I know for myself, I often, like, the first time that I went in, I witnessed one of those acts where this younger guy was just he said, "You want me to give you a lift?" at the end of the program, and said this to an older guy in a wheelchair. And then, I'm walking out of the prison as I'm looking back over my shoulder at this young guy pushing this older guy in the wheelchair. And my overwhelming, all of the impressions that I had of what this space were completely undermined by this image of compassion. And you've met my friend Michael, who is a very, I think, empathic individual. And he was saying to me that his overwhelming impression is the compassion that happens inside these spaces. And I really do think that's true. And it is, I feel that, like you were mentioning earlier, about knowing that all those guys would have your back if something were to happen. I very much feel the same way. And for whatever may transpire in places that we don't see or don't have access to, this to me is the overwhelming impression that I'm left with, and that this is something that I believe about humanity. And it's something I think, being in these spaces when we are showing up as our best selves, as we like to try and create the space for that to happen in the programs, that this is who we are. We are compassionate people who transcend any differences that we might have in order to take care of one another. And that's what humanity is at its best. And as cynical as I am a lot of the times, I just hope that helps us prevail through all the challenges that we have as a species on this planet. So,
it's the beautiful thing about what we do, for sure. And one of the things you mentioned just reminded me about, when we show up and act in a way that supports empathy and compassion, and we bring that into a space that, maybe people don't assume that is supposed to be there, and it's a correctional facility, and there's this other side of it. But when we can bring that in, I believe that is, like you said, it helps bring that out in a place where it is tampered down a lot. And that's how we can show up in life, because wonderful things happen outside my door all the time, but also other things that are not so wonderful happen outside my door, and are not necessarily just happening inside of a prison, right? So if we can show up that way across the board, I think it brings it out in all the spaces that we come into.
It just there are this experience and this experience, how it is influenced how I see the world. And just I remember reading a book way back when called How Yoga Works. And, the book, there's a young woman, she's arrested and she's put in this jail. and she starts teaching yoga to the police chief in this like sort of quasi fantasy medieval Indian milieu. And then it's clear that, well, she's the one who is free and everybody else who's outside of the jail cell is imprisoned. And there are so many ways in which there's this blurring that's happened around just my consciousness about like what is freedom and what is not freedom, and yeah, we could. This is an onion with an infinite number of layers.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and transition into some Q&A. And then I noticed that there's like a whole ton of messages that have come in on the chat. And so
it looks like Charlene is asking about what book you just mentioned, How Yoga Works, right?
Oh, yeah. How Yoga Works. The author's last name is Roche, Roche. And I think sometimes we might have to, I think he's one of these folks that you may need to separate the person from the work of art that they created for whatever it's worth. And I hope I'm not like disparaging him if there isn't some reason they have to do that. Good Lord. So I want to invite folks if like, as I scroll through the, yeah, so I'm passing by a question from Nicole in Tahoe. After 7 years, what challenges do you face in delivering the practice in your own self-care? And I'm very curious about this because I've also noticed that you've got something that I can learn from your answer to this question.
Well, it did take me a while to understand and feel and notice that when I, facilitating afterwards, I couldn't understand why I was so tired.
Yeah.
I've been an athlete, my whole life. And when we do the practice inside of different facilities, generally speaking, it's not, I would never call it an intense physical practice, right? It may be an intense emotionally or an intense spiritually, but I never considered it as an intense physical practice. So for a long time, I felt like, why do I feel kind of exhausted after teaching? And it did, again, was reminded that it isn't the physicality of it that is what is happening. It's the other stuff. It's the spirituality of it. It's the emotional piece. It's the working through things, even in my own body that, might still be unresolved for whatever reason, but also being in a space where you are extending, compassion and empathy to a large number of people can feel draining. And that's what I was feeling in the best way possible, of course, but in a way that I would never, ever not do. But I just had to notice and remind myself, oh, okay, so I just need to take a nap after. I just need a nap after I go and teach, yoga, just because that's what my body needs. I need to shut it down for a bit and recharge, and then I'm fine. And so for a long time, I would, if we went in on Saturday's bill at Donovan, I would, do that in the morning and then, go about my day and kind of schedule things and have the rest of my day. And now I know that I need to come home and relax for 2 hours and maybe take a nap. And then I can go and do other things to support that, that feeling and those things that might come up, or, just the, like you said, self-care, just taking care of myself to be able to do that again. So that's been something I've been sure to do a lot of after I teach.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this is again, to me, when you bring awareness to something, it is almost, everything else sort of flows.
Right.
Being aware, oh wow, I feel drained, or this is why. And then it becomes obvious the actions that flow from that, as long as we're not resisting the awareness. So there was a question about touch and about hugs, when there is so much emotion that can come up, and I wonder if
Yeah.
yeah.
Inside of a prison system and correctional facility, hugging is not something that I do, and typically not something that is allowed from facilitators. Shaking hands is something that we do. The guys like to do some fist bumps and, some elbow taps and, things like that. But I also, again, I teach at Donovan where Bill goes in and I also facilitate at Las Colinas, which is a women's detention center. And those are two very different facilities and very different experiences and, different demographics. And so there have been several times at Las Colinas specifically where I felt like, oh my gosh, I just want to give you a hug. Like that would, we know how physical touch and can be healing for people. And, that is in the back of my mind sometimes where I go, oh man, I just wish I could hug this person. And you can't. It's not appropriate in that setting. But what I do say is I'm giving you a hug right now.
Yeah.
And, I'm here with you as you, move through these emotions. I recently had a experience where somebody did become quite emotional during the class. And being there, and I think being there and letting her, in this case, know that what she was experiencing was normal, that it was a part of the practice, that we are, kind of discharging energy, and like that is what's happening right now. And kind of just being with her as she experienced it, I think was what I could do at that time. And so even though I felt like if we were on the outside and I was her friend, I would want to give her a hug, still just being present with folks as they experience things, I think is powerful, because a lot of times the reason we are in a facility, and the reason someone ends up in a facility, is maybe other people have not been present in their lives. And so just showing up and being there and literally standing next to them for a moment and breathing with them can be quite powerful.
Yeah. I had an experience recently where it was, there was somebody who you could just feel the well of emotion rising. I mean, it felt like it was a geyser ready to burst. Somebody who was going through some really challenging stuff, and he's a wonderful guy, has so much dignity and poise, and just like the smile on his face is beautiful. But there's so much trauma there, and there's a lot of disconnection from loved ones on the outside, to the point where he was losing his only connections, and it's apparent that we are his people on the outside now. And to not be able to give him a hug at that moment was really challenging for me. And but at the same time, I also know that it's like it might have opened something up.
Sure.
That I was on my way out, this, when I did that, when you did that, and I do that now, and I can feel my hands, and to even, to offer that as an energetic offering, and to bring that into the body, feels really powerful and appropriate. I want to drop a couple of links into the chat right now for everybody. If you're not, you can find this on our website and on our community site. There are some questions that we talk about the answers to, like, what poses do you avoid? And we do, we may work with people who've suffered sexual abuse or who are perpetrators of sexual abuse. And so, there are some poses that we don't get into, like happy baby is one. And so we talk about those kinds of things in the foundational training, but then really understanding like why and what's underneath all of that, I think, is the most important thing. Because once you understand, I think, what we go over in the foundational training in terms of trauma and how trauma manifests in the body and the type of the set and setting for incarceration, then it starts to become really obvious. We also avoid poses that are just simply like headstand. And it takes a lot of control to be able to do a headstand in a very safe way. And we really can't ensure that everybody who is going, if we demonstrate a headstand, it might be appropriate for 1 out of 50 people, and all 50 people are going to try, and we don't want anyone to get injured. And then also, I dropped the link to our facilitator application. But I thought that there was also a question. So there's a lot of answers there. If you're enjoying this and you can't get enough, please join us for the foundational training and come to the workshops that are a part of that. Because the connection that is there, and we get to answer more of these types of questions. But there was a question about yoga philosophy, and do we ever bring yoga philosophy, and does it ever become appropriate? And yeah. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes, I think is kind of the first answer. Yes, sometimes it can be very appropriate, and sometimes it is something that we do want to spend time talking about and, doing little Dharma talks. The way that I personally have connected with yoga, like I said, from my own personal experience, was more through the lens of athletics and anatomy and the physicality of it initially. And so I also like to, if I'm going to talk about something, for example, when we do balancing poses, talking about a drishti and a focal point. Drishti is a Sanskrit word, but in life, and in balancing postures, we can use that to kind of transcend the meaning of just a focal point in a balancing posture, a focal point in life, a focal point in, a time and space where you need to have a North Star so that when things happen in life and, someone or something knocks you a little bit off balance, you can come back to it and know that it's there. So things like that, where if I can relate them to a life experience or what someone might be experiencing as they're going through these classes inside different facilities, that's what I like to bring in. But certainly not all bits of yoga philosophy would be applicable and, appropriate at different times. And so I think it is a lot. I know, Bill, you've done a great job of bringing different things in that are applicable for this population. And that's the other thing we have to consider is that, we are inside of a facility where we're not talking about driving in traffic or like picking your kids up from school, for example. Like, those aren't examples that are applicable at that time and may actually trigger some other things that we're not supporting or talking about. But I'll let you add on, Bill.
Yeah. I think what It absolutely becomes a part of the practice. I love to lean into bringing in not just yoga philosophy, but then also just wisdom from any tradition. The truth when you see it or hear it. And sharing anything about lessons from neuroscience. I'm a big neuroscience fan, and so if I can talk about oxytocin, or gamma aminobutyric acid, and make that relevant to the practice, there's going to be somebody in that circle that digs that. I think one of the things, Jackie, you're absolutely right. We want to consider accessibility whenever we're bringing anything in, and inclusivity. Because if we came in with a really heavy yogic vibe, we could turn some people off, and occasionally guys will opt out, folks will opt out of the practice because, of a belief that they hold, but we want to try and minimize that. So really making it as inclusive as possible and as accessible as possible, both, intellectually accessible and then relatable, as you're noting. Certain lessons might feel traumatizing in the way that they might be delivered. And there's a one of those things, I think that helps you is you can't plan for everything, and so being able to really be aware of the situation, and being sensitive to who's in the room. It really helps, which is one of the reasons why, PYP, I think James started this training, is because you've got a lot of people out there who want, with very good intentions, to go and do this kind of work. But there is you need to be informed not only about trauma, but about incarceration. And so the training really helps you become informed in a way that you're going to be able to have do the greatest possible good with the least possible harm. There was another there was another question that I was going to that I saw in the chat. Jackie, did you have something that you saw in the chat that you wanted to speak to?
I think I saw a question about, we talked about touch, but I think I saw a question around, oh yes, from Nicole. For her question was going in with a set program, or if we, kind of think on our feet and go with the energy of the room. And I think that that's a really important question, because you never know what the energy of the room will be. When you get there, and different facilities, different things can be going on. Some facilities have been on lockdown for a while. And so if folks come in and there's a lot of kind of angst and energy and kind of a higher vibration of people, that's a different practice than if it is super, super hot and everybody is just feeling lethargic and already kind of sweating. And, we've had experiences in Donovan where, the room that we're supposed to be in is occupied that day. And unbeknownst to us, we, need to either not have a class or, make a pivot and decide where else we might be able to teach class. And so I've ended up teaching in the middle of the open outdoor yard on a basketball court or off onto the side. And that's a little bit of a different class here in Southern California, depending on the day and the heat, than it might be in an air conditioned, gym, or, a gym that's much cooler and darker, and it, sunlight is not beating down on us. So, so to answer the question, for me personally, I have a sense of some of the things that that I'd like to do. And I always try and move through something that gets the 6 movements of the spine. And, making sure that we have an opportunity for usually some hip opening, because a lot of folks have, hip, back, and knee physical complaints. So we can kind of address those a little bit, but otherwise it is a little bit of a go with the flow and kind of feel things out. And sometimes I even ask if anybody has anything that they're interested in trying or have questions about that we might be able to integrate. And if, a lot of people are saying that day, oh, my neck hurts, or, I have a headache, or, they're just feeling, I get the sense that the group as a whole is feeling a lot of something around this area. We might spend a little bit more time focusing there, just as an example.
Yeah. 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 And I second all of that. And just, really the thing that I've seen most successful is keeping it accessible, really, and not like not becoming I'm going to use the word fiddly. I don't know if it's the right word to it, or more like anything that's really technical or meant to get into a particular area, that it's really a full body thing. Because we want something that's going to work for all those different bodies in the room. And honestly, I mean, with a yoga class we have classes now that we have up to like 35 and 45 people sometimes in the circle, that if you get too particular or too focused and move away from the general. And the other thing too that I would say, when you're working with a group, it's good. And I think with the folks that we facilitate with RJD, we've been practicing together and taking each other's classes so often that we're going to be within the same plus or minus 20%.
Right.
And what that I think allows for the practitioners, or rather for the participants in the circle, now we're going to do this. And they don't have to think or pay attention to what we're doing. They can really just get into their body because they know where we're going. And if you're working together with other people, sometimes it is helpful to have, I think, something to coalesce around. Because if somebody's coming in and doing something radically different than the other person, then the people who are in the circle don't build that muscle memory that's going to allow their mind to check out, so they fully drop into the experience of being in their bodies, which is like, I think the sweet spot, the zen of what we're really going for, is to be able to just nobody's listening to us anymore. They're just moving and breathing in their own experience and choices for themselves in that.
Yes. One of my favorite things when it happens in the classes, if we get to a point where we're offering some kind of flow or movement sequence, that after, just a little bit of instruction and, things to consider and think about, that people begin to do it on their own, in their own pace, in their own way. And then all of a sudden we're all sort of moving together and on our own simultaneously. It's beautiful to watch in the room. It's beautiful to be a part of, just to feel kind of that breath and that flow and letting things go and flow through the mind, and just dropping down into the body and feeling that.
And I just think, to speak to those moments when that is happening, and I remember so many times, bearing witness to that, but that's one of those moments where I think something is happening, some healing is happening interpersonally between the members of the community that we're practicing with, where this is what trauma healing in a group setting is all about. It is about being able to be in sync with other people, to be relaxed and to be trusting. And when we get into that sort of group movement where we are individuals but flowing together in that way, something really, really powerful is happening at a therapeutic level within the program. And I've heard the folks in our program speak to that we don't talk in this program the way we do in other groups, but there's healing happening on a different level. Okay, we could.
Yeah, I know we could go on. I was just getting this book where it talks about that, and another book, if people are interested, is My Grandmother's Hands.
Yeah,
great resource and great way to learn a little bit more about our systems in this country specifically, and how they impact different bodies. And one of the offerings in the book is talking about moving together as a group and anchoring together as movement, or with movement as that anchor, and how powerful that can be for kind of coming into the same level of vibration, and then opening the door for compassion and empathy in those spaces. So it's another great read for sure.
Okay. I'm aware that there's probably some questions in the chat that we didn't hit, and I just want to invite you to reach out via an email. You can email me, bill@prisonyoga.org, if you would like to follow up on anything that we didn't touch on. Do you want to actually, let's do this, because I know that you've got a go-to for closing out a space. So I'll invite Jackie to go ahead and oh gosh, if there were questions on the Q&A that we didn't hit, which we didn't hit. Oh boy, I'm terrible at this thing from a technical.
See a few there. But yes, and I'm also available to, I think probably Instagram is a good place to find me. Jack's Croc or Dr. Jack's Fitness is also a place that you can ask some questions. But yeah, I know we've got.
Yeah.
If it's me, I have so many questions, right? You hear about this thing that you're interested in, and you go, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And so definitely keep asking.
I'm hoping that what happens is that I can see these questions that are in the Q&A, and then also I'll look back through the chat, and if there are specific things, because Natalie, I noticed you got a specific question about women teaching men, and yeah, it is allowed, and I honestly think that there are reasons why it's a good thing, and it's a great question. But I want to make sure we stick to our time boundaries. So if I'll try and follow up. If you don't hear from me, please feel free to send me an email. All right, Jackie, take it away.
Yeah, this is something that I like to close all of the practices with. You may know it as a loving kindness meditation. And I think for the facilities that we go into, giving loving kindness to ourselves and the people around us, and especially to people who we might not have positive relationships with all the time, can be really impactful in this process. So you are welcome to come to a comfortable seat, maybe close your eyes if that feels appropriate for you. I like to bring my hands either on my chest, maybe one on my belly and one on my heart, or in prayer pose, just noticing again the sensations in your breath. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we be safe. May we be at peace. You're welcome to repeat this in your own mind for yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I be at peace. We extend the same to people around us, people that we interact with, people that we don't know, and people that we don't like all the time. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you be at peace. May all beings everywhere be happy, healthy, safe, and at peace. Namaste.
Namaste. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you
for being with us today.
Thanks for everybody. Thank you all for being here. I really genuinely appreciate having you as a part of our community. And Jackie, thank you so much. And I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Yes, I'll see you tomorrow, actually.
See you tomorrow.
Okay.
All righty.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.